So the first is with Andrew Paulsen. As you know, Andrew is a teacher from New Jersey. Andrew is here on a project looking at math and looking at Eastern approaches to math and their implementation in Taiwan, and whether any of those opportunities and changes can be used back in New Jersey when he goes back to teaching in New Jersey. Andrew, you joined us in January, right before the Senior Conference, I think, before the Senior Conference. So it's been a pleasure having you here, and we look forward to your presentation. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you so much. So thank you guys all so much for coming this afternoon. The name of my project is Implementing Eastern Pedagogical Approaches to Teaching Mathematics in Urban High Schools. So some of the things that I would like to talk about today, I want to talk about Taiwanese education culture and how that's influenced some really incredible policy throughout the country. Talk about some of the things that go on in classrooms and show you a 5-minute clip of a Taiwanese class. Talk about some ideas I've had for implementation, and then leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So I want to start my presentation with a few acknowledgments. I want to thank Fulbright Taiwan and the Foundation for Scholarly Exchange for all of their incredible support, the United States Department of State for the grant, the Newark Public Schools for allowing me to take a sabbatical and come to Taiwan for the last 6 months, the Taiwanese Ministry of Education, my host, National Kaohsiung Normal University, and Girls High School in Kaohsiung, of which I've spent a lot of my classroom observations there. I also want to thank my mom, my dad, my sister Kimberly, who all wish they could be here today. They're back in New York. My mentor, marriage brother Sean Salmon, my mentee, Matthew Atikortua, the entire Fulbright Taiwan staff, specifically Dr. Boki, Lisa Lin, Charlie Chang, and Fonda Mao. And the names you see here are all the teachers and support staff at Girls High School, which I've really gotten to know very well. Thank you all so much for everything you have done to help me be where I am today. So let's talk a little bit about Taiwanese culture. And I'm of the belief that countries put on their currency what they value. So if you look at most countries' currencies, you see presidents, former leaders, landmarks. And I think it's really interesting. The Taiwanese currency, their $1,000 bill, about 34 US, prominently features students learning. And I think to me, this is a symbol of the importance the Taiwanese public puts on public education. And the $500 bill also has students playing baseball, which I think is really interesting as well. Truth be told, though, this culture goes back thousands of years to Confucian academies. So this is a reflection pool in Tainan. And if you were to read anything about the teachers at the Confucian academies, they would often walk around these reflection pools after their lessons to reflect. They would literally look into the pool and see a picture of themselves reflected and think critically about their lesson and how they could teach it better. I think it's interesting that although most high schools don't have reflection pools throughout Taiwan, almost all teachers engage in some form of reflection after their lessons today. Another major part of Taiwanese culture is the remnants of the imperial exam system. So hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, Keiju was invented as really a way to be equitable. So for those that wanted certain jobs, they would need to sit through a standardized test. And I really love this quote from Dr. Yong Zhao. Keiju was a tool to identify and recruit the most capable and virtuous individuals into government, instead of relying on members of the hereditary middle class. Perhaps most notably, and because of its perceived fairness, objectivity, and openness, Keiju gave birth to the idea of a meritocracy, a core value in many Eastern countries, including Taiwan. Sun Yat-sen has an interesting story too. Who knows if this story is true, but he apparently got into a conversation with an American senator one time. And he was making fun of the senator of a recent election in the United States, where a truck driver went to an election with a medical doctor. And the truck driver won the election. That was a big upset. And Sun Yat-sen apparently said to this American senator, "You see, this is what happens when you don't have a system based on imperial exams. I really like that. I think it's very interesting. A lot of this Taiwanese culture impacts a lot of the pedagogy and education policy that we see in schools today. So I want to take us through, just for 5 minutes or so, some of the education policy throughout Taiwan and some of the education reform that has been going on for the last 50 years or so. As I said at the mid-year conference, Taiwan leads the world in mathematical performance on both PISA and TIMSS, which are the Trends in Mathematics and Science Study or Survey. I think it's important to note, though, that if you have a problem in education, one size does not necessarily fit all. So a student struggling to learn a specific concept in Newark, New Jersey may have a different answer, a different solution than students learning in Austin, Texas, or Kaohsiung, Taiwan. So this is a schedule of one of the teachers, and I picked a schedule that I thought was representative of other high school teachers. So a couple things I want to point out here. So first, you notice that school starts at 8:20, gets out at 5 o'clock. And you'll notice that everyone has lunch at the same time, 12:10 to about 1:15 or so, and that's not on the schedule here. Everyone in the whole school has lunch at the same time. So although the day is about 2 hours longer than the average public school in the United States, the average teacher only teaches about 3 50-minute classes each day. They have a lot of time during the school day to think critically about their lessons, to engage in grading or thinking about their students, and also to work collaboratively with their peers, which I have been seen firsthand. This, I believe, is one of the main reasons that Taiwanese teachers are able to do it. If I were to put up a schedule of the average American teacher, most American teachers get 30 minutes for lunch and typically 1 prep, depending on the school and depending on the state. I also love that Taiwanese public schools, they don't hire janitors. So in all the different schools, the children are responsible for cleaning. And I really believe this gives them joint ownership to take care of their classrooms like it's their home. Most schools do hire cleaning services for the bathrooms, but other than that, the students are responsible to clean everything. And this policy can be seen in other neighboring countries, such as Japan as well. This is a lunch that one of my students sent me from Newark, New Jersey last week. And I showed this picture to some of my colleagues in Kaohsiung, and they said, "What is that?" I said, "It's lunch." They're like, "No, like, we get that, but like, what is this?" I was like, "I think it's supposed to be macaroni and cheese with an old apple and a milk, and that's lunch for a 16-year-old that's growing." And my question for you is, would you eat that? I mean, me personally, I wouldn't. And I want to juxtapose this picture with a picture of a school lunch I had. I'm very fortunate for a lot of the principals. They often invite me to eat lunch. And this was one of my favorite meals I had in Kaohsiung, the same day the other picture was taken. And in case you can't tell, this is salmon. And it was delicious. It was restaurant quality. It came with fresh fruit, vegetables, and even came with a dessert here, which was fantastic. And I think it's just another policy implication. If we really care about our students, we need to feed them. We need to give them nutritious meals that are really tasty, just like they do down in throughout Taiwan. Just want to spend a minute or so going through some of the education reform throughout Taiwan. In 1968, the 9-year compulsory education law was passed. In 1980, Dr. Fu Lai led this new research, trying to shift the thinking of how to teach and shift it to how do students learn. And I think that's a major shift that we still see in the United States and Taiwan today. Shifting from what our teachers need to do to what do students need to learn. The Forest School was the first progressive school in Taiwan. It was very controversial at the time. It was founded in 1990. And for those that are familiar, it was based off of the Central Park East schools run out of New York City that are pretty famous throughout the country for progressive schools as well. And in 1997, the Ministry of Education launched a new junior high school math curriculum. What I think is very interesting about this date is they did a lot of research 5 years later, in 2002, and most teachers were using the new curriculum, but they weren't using the instructional strategies that were recommended. What does that mean? Although it was a new curriculum, the teachers were just teaching the new problems. They weren't changing their strategy of teaching. More contemporary education reform. In 2008, the ministry launched Taiwan's National Academy for Educational Research to try to look at best practices from both in Taiwan and abroad. And the 12-year compulsory education law was passed in 2010. I think it's interesting that although the 12-year compulsory education law was passed in 2010, the 12-year basic curriculum is not scheduled to be implemented until next year, and the high school math curriculum will be rolled out during 2019-2020. Compare that to policies in the United States, such as Common Core, that was basically rolled out right away. As a teacher that supports the best interests and the ideas behind Common Core, I think our country did a very, very poor job at rolling it out. And a lot of parents were confused with it, a lot of teachers didn't really understand it, and I really think that has to get to the way we communicated the information. Junyi Academy, we heard from Ray at the mid-year conference, was launched in 2012 to try to spread these progressive educational ideals to all public schools throughout Taiwan. And the Primary and Junior High School Act, which encouraged more advancement of these progressive schools, was passed in 2016. I think it's really important to give you some context of educational culture and policy before we actually look at some classrooms. And the results of this reform, I think, are pretty dramatic. So in 1952, about half of the Taiwanese public were considered literate. Compared to 2 years ago, it was 98.5%. And the majority of people that are not literate are over the age of 65. In 2017, the best numbers I could find from the Ministry of Education, 96% of Taiwanese senior high school students pursued some form of tertiary education, including vocational programs. Side note for that, even vocational high schools in Taiwan, most students pursue some form of college even after going to a vocational school to further their training. Compare this number to the United States, where about 2/3 of our students pursue tertiary education, again including vocational programs, and about half drop out within 2 years. And I, biased, I'm a teacher, Dr. Goki has given a presentation about the 3 miracles of Taiwan, and I fundamentally believe that it's this focus on public education that has helped Taiwan achieve democracy, incredible medicine and technology, and become one of the 4 Asian countries. So let's actually talk about what happens in Taiwanese classrooms. So 2 weeks ago, I was just telling Dr. Goki this story. I was at in Kaohsiung, the FlipX education conference that they've been holding every year. And the local Minister of Education encouraged me to come on stage and asked me some really great questions. And one of the questions she asked me was, have you found an answer? You came here because Taiwanese students do very well on PISA. Have you found an answer yet? And, you know, as a joke, I really want to go back to the United States and tell people, yes, I found the answer. It is unicycle. This is actually at a school in Jinmen that specializes in unicycles. But I think it would be hilarious if I go back to Congress and tell them that everyone in Taiwan rides unicycles, and that's why they do so well on that. But it's true, sometimes the most distinctive features of a country's teaching were also the most difficult for natives to notice. And when I've asked Taiwanese teachers about certain techniques, it was so ingrained within them that they didn't even realize that it was necessarily special. You know, some schools I go to, and you have to take your shoes off before you enter the class, which, you know, why does that matter? It helps keep the classroom clean, it helps keep the classroom neat, it helps make it feel like a home where students feel that. Also, most schools in Taiwan, students stay in one classroom the whole day, and the teachers rotate around all the way through high school. They might go, you know, if they have a special class like an English class, they might change. But I think this is really interesting as well. So, You know, Dr. Reed Criddle inspired me at the mid-year conference. You know, he said something like, you can take the conductor away from Utah, but he's still always going to be a conductor, right? So you can take the teacher out of Newark, New Jersey, but you can't take the teacher out of me necessarily. So I just want you guys to reflect for 15 seconds or so. If you want to talk with your colleagues, or if you just want to reflect individually, that's fine. What do you think an average high school class in Taiwan looks like? So just reflect for 15 seconds or so. What do you think an average high school classroom, math high school classroom in Taiwan looks like?
And you mean the grade?
High school.
High school.
Yeah, a high school, let's say a 10th grade class.
10th grade.
Or in Taiwan, they call that a first grade classroom, which is a story for another day. But in the United States, we say 10th grade high school math class. Does anyone want to share? What do you guys think? All right. So I've got a lot of feedback from teachers in the United States. They imagine rows and teachers talking and students writing for 50 minutes. And truth be told, that does happen some places though. But I'm really excited that a lot of the classrooms I look like this. And this is just like a 5-minute clip. I want to show this to you guys, and then I'm going to analyze it and talk about it, and then talk about some best practices. So this was taken at Kaohsiung Girls High School a few weeks ago. Just to give you some context, the teacher was teaching sequences and series, which is typically taught in 12th grade in the United States. This is a 10th grade classroom. And he showed them the 12 days of Christmas. So around the first day of Christmas, what you looking to do? And they need to make a scope and sequence. They need to actually make, a series and a sequence to determine how many gifts were given over the course of the 12 days of Christmas. And they weren't allowed to just add all the numbers up. They had to do it mathematically. So, here we go. I'm just going to talk over this video while it's going on. The first thing you notice is the genuine joy. I see this everywhere I go throughout Taiwan. How happy kids are to be in school. It's so refreshing. It really is. Next, consider the collaborative nature of this lesson. Students are engaged, working with their peers. They are doing the heavy lifting. Notice that the teacher was walking around and he identified a student that had an interesting answer. So while the other groups are finishing up, that student has gone up to the board and is putting her work on the board. So you can see the series that she's writing there. For those that may be unfamiliar with it, that is a sigma sign. Notice some groups are talking about their notes. Here's a really good view of it. You see the sigma sign? And she gets the correct answer, which is 364 gifts. And notice the groups are still working. And the teacher is telling the student, I want you to explain your thinking. How'd you come up with this? And she's like, do I have to? It's like, yeah, you did a great job. And she's like, okay. And now the teacher brings the class back. And notice who does the talking. I love the version of the song this teacher picked for the record. It's amazing. I think we've seen enough just to give you a sense of what's going on. This student that explains her thinking. And I just want to reflect for a second. These students are doing calculus. And they're having fun with it. And they're learning. And my wondering is, how can we ensure that every classroom in the United States can look like this? This is a very advanced topic. Right? This isn't adding fractions, right? Which most students struggle with anyway, to be honest. But this is sequence and series, a calculus unit, AP calculus, and the kids are working together collaboratively on it. Oh, so inspiring. And there's a lot of other exemplar aspects of Taiwanese teachers too. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics notes that effective mathematics teaching includes a strong focus on using varied mathematical representations. And I see this throughout Taiwan. This classroom is in Kaohsiung with the same teacher, same unit. This is a teacher in Jinmin. Notice she's teaching students to derive the cylinder formula. They know the area of a circle, and the area of a rectangle. Contrast this with what is typically done in the United States, where a teacher starts by writing the formula on the board, and then kids need to practice over and over again. Manipulatives, teachers thinking outside the box. This teacher is from Tainan. This is also from Kaohsiung. Pashi Salberg, who is probably the leading expert right now on Finnish education, has noted that if we continue to ignore the power of students' own ideas and conceptions, we will only perpetuate the notion that mathematics and science, among other subjects in our school curriculum, are irrelevant, uninteresting, and difficult to learn. And just like that video I showed you, I see a lot of classrooms where students come up and share their work, share their thinking, and show what their thought process is to the entire class. I really would love to change the idea of a teacher to being from a sage on a stage to a facilitator of knowledge, like most university professors teach. Just to give you some context with some surrounding countries around Taiwan. China, the leading economic competitor of the United States, is decentralizing its curriculum, diversifying assessment, and encouraging local autonomy and innovation. Meanwhile, Singapore is promoting a creative environment characterized by teach less, learn more. In other places in Asia, schools are limiting direct instruction and mere recitation of facts, and looking for more innovative pedagogies, and encourage students to design and make things. So that's great. I have all these wonderful ideas that I've learned in Taiwan. How are we going to implement these? And at that conference in Kaohsiung a few weeks ago, one of the directors of the examination branch of the Taiwanese government said some really interesting things about PISA. And I'm going to translate this slide into English. There we go. And he was talking about literacy-oriented test design. And students have to combine what they know and apply their prior knowledge within the context of their daily life and their local community. And one of the quotes that he said that really stuck out to me, and again, he was giving the lecture in Chinese and someone was translating next to me. He said, we should be proud of our results on PISA. But if PISA, a standardized test, is the only metric we use to determine whether our education system is effective or not, we are not going to have an effective education system. And this is coming from one of the directors of the branch that is involved with testing. He's saying, PISA is important, but it's not the only important thing. And it was just so inspiring for me hearing that from him. And the burning question that I'm working through now is, so what? Now what? How am I going to implement this back in the United States in urban schools, many of which are underfunded? I think it would be easy for me to stand up here and say, these are the policies we need to implement, this is what teachers should be doing. But I think a better way is trying to answer some essential questions, such as, what is the purpose of public education in 2018? And what role mathematics plays in public education? Singapore is often talked about as having incredible math teaching, but they have a very, very centralized Ministry of Education. My question is, how do we incorporate exemplar policies and pedagogies using democratic means in a country with diverse values? And a lot of people have said, well, what do you mean by diverse values? Look at the strikes throughout the United States right now, in Oklahoma, in Arizona, and West Virginia. We have underfunded public education in the United States for decades. How can we revolutionize our schools so that every student has a sense of purpose? And the one that keeps me up at night, how do we ensure that every student, no matter where they have been born or what zip code they live in, has the opportunity to attain a truly transformational education? The Minnesota Teacher of the Year from 2015 wrote a book last year. And he said that, I'm at a particular point on my journey. I have no clue of anything I think is right, but it's the truest answers I have found thus far. And I really resonate with this quote, with where I am professionally, and thinking about how, in the words of Dr. Joe Bowler, we can have a revolution in math classes today. Before I open the floor to questions and answer session, Senator Fulbright had this vision decades ago of creating a world with a little more knowledge and a little less conflict. For me, it has been the opportunity of a lifetime to come to Taiwan. I really appreciate the Taiwanese hospitality and all of the people that have helped make this experience so transformative for me. But if I'm going to be honest, the knowledge part is what is so important to me. Because there's not a day goes by that I don't think about my incredible students in the New York Public Schools. And when I get back to the United States, I promise to work relentlessly, to work to a day where every child, no matter where they have been born, what zip code they live in, or what public school they attend, can attain a truly transformational education. Thank you very much.